Hello fellow survivors, and welcome to a campfire chat where we're going to talk about what's in the DLC part 2 that's out now, the Signal Void content that has been added. It has now been out for a little while, things have been patched and improved, and today we're going to talk about everything that has been added with DLC part 2. So we're not going to talk that much about what's coming in the future, unlike some of my other campfire videos, and let me just clarify in case you're watching and want to ask, no, they have not yet added the cougar, and no, they have not yet added the sled, which is usually what people ask about. Instead, we're going to talk about what they did add or change, which is first and foremost the tails that they added, the bunkers, the fire-hardened arrows, the acorns, a beach combing, new clothes, and some minor stuff that they added or changed as well. So they're going to talk about that today, and I must say that the DLC by now is definitely worth getting if you don't have it already. By that, let's hop into the tails, because that's the main reason for that. So the main thing that was added with the DLC part 2 was the tail. Now they have previously announced there'll be 3 tails, and this is the first of those 3. And this one is called Signal Void, and it adds an extra incentive to go to Forsaken Airfield. The Forsaken Airfield region, people were pretty split about that. Some people love it, some people dislike it because it's too empty, but now there's a reason to go there. So the tail, the way it works is that you get a radio that you have to pick up in Forsaken Airfield. You go to Forsaken Airfield in the far range, up into the control tower, and there will be a radio or transponder. And once you have that, what you can do is you can repair towers around Great Bear Island. So it's not just in the DLC area, it's all over the place. And you can repair them technically before getting the radio, but they won't do anything. Basically, once you repair these towers, it activates the transmissions or the signals in that area and a neighboring area, which means you can go around with your radio and it will pick up a signal and that will lead you somewhere. The tale itself is kind of like a story within survival, and yes, this is survival only. It's not a challenge, it's in survival, it's an extra layer in survival. And the way it works is that the transponder has two modes. One of them signals the tail and where to find these hidden bunkers that have a story. And then the other one signals loot, so it can lead you to supply cache that has some loot you can find, but also crash sites and some other things. And I have to say that this is great. If you do the tail, you get at the end of it a rifle holster, which you can put in as an accessory, and it reduces the weight of your rifle, so that your total weight is basically what changes, not the weight of the item. So you basically can carry more loot. Now, personally, I think that it's worth getting the DLC just for this, because this opens up a whole new world of exploration and loot. There's also an added story to it. It gives you an incentive to do more in the world. So if you don't have the DLC, I recommend getting it just for this, because you can then get the radio, and that will unlock a bunch of new things to do across the world of Great Bear. There are 4 repair towers that are related to the tail that will unlock finding secret caches around, but there's also a 5th one in Desolation Point, and it might add more. So that means that everywhere is covered, so you can go and find hidden loot all sorts of places. So because of that, I think it's a really cool immersive thing. This only works during the Aurora, and of course it's dangerous to go out during the Aurora because of Aurora wolves, but it's a really great addition, so I actually really recommend getting the DLC just because of this. Now, when this was released, it was actually only on Stalker and below. It was not on Interloper. However, there was a lot of community, well, let's just say outrage, and they really wanted it to be on Interloper. Initially they said no, because there's too much loot involved, and that's not really what Interloper is about. But after listening to community feedback, you have to give it to Hinterland. They listened to what people wanted. And on April 21st, with patch 2.5, they did add tails to Interloper. Granted, if you play the tail on Interloper, you do not get much loot from it. There's very little in the bunkers. The caches around will mostly be empty, and they won't have much in it. So the use of it is much reduced, but that's okay. That's Interloper for you. So that's the tail. I highly recommend getting it. It's really, really great. Then another thing they've added is the bunkers. You may have noticed previously with DLC Part 1 that they removed the bunkers around the Great Bear Island. And they used to be only in Mystery Lake and in Pleasant Valley, plus there was one in Blackrock, and then the static one in Tomb of Pleasant Valley that was always there before the rope. And now they have put them back in, the prepper caches. And now the way it works is that there are 9 bunkers across Great Bear, so they're all over the place in fixed location. They're hidden. You have to find them. And the way it works is that 3 of these bunkers will be full with loot, and the other 6 will be empty or nearly empty. These bunkers will also be on Interloper, but they're mostly empty on Interloper, so you won't find much loot, but there'll be a little bit. And you can find the bunkers with the radio as well, I believe. So that may be another reason to have that. So that's back in the game, and it gives an extra incentive to go exploring. There's a lot of basically exploration encouragement in this DLC. Then they have added something called Fire-Hardened Arrows. This is a second set of arrows you can make, which is crafted at a campfire. It just requires sticks and feathers. So you can just make it at a campfire, which is new. And this is meant to kill small prey like bunnies and probably later the ptarmigan. It's not meant to be for wolves or bears. In fact, there was a video by YouTuber Bashro where he shot 400 of these arrows in one bear and it did not die. It also breaks upon hit, so it's not very durable. It won't break if you miss, but it breaks if you hit. So these are clearly meant for this small prey. However, it can scare away a wolf if you hit the wolf with it, and it will flee away. So you can use it as a deterrent against the wolf, but you can't hunt wolves with it. Then they have added Acorns and Oak Trees. Now, Oak Trees were already in the DLC area only, but now with this patch, they are added to the whole of the Great Bear, and you can find it in pretty much every region. There isn't any new kind of wood or anything, like oak wood, maybe that comes later, but for now what's unique about them is acorns. If you look on the ground around oak trees, you find some acorns, and these acorns can be processed into making basically a mini coffee, and that's great. Now these acorns do require a lot of processing. There's a lot of steps to actually making the coffee. First you have to harvest them, and then you have to break them down. Then you have to boil them, and then you can eat them at that point if you like as a snack, or with a hammer you can crush them into a ground, and then you can cook it again, which makes a coffee. The coffee is kind of like the regular coffee, but basically half as effective. It's not renewable, so it works like mushrooms and that sort of thing. Once you picked it up, it won't come back. But for Interloper, it adds a whole new. It adds another T to the game, which is really big. So for Interloper, this is a huge addition, I would say. For lower difficulties, it's a minor difference. And then you have beach combing. The beach combing is very interesting. So in the past, if you walked across regions that had a shoreline, which is Desolation Point, Crumbling Highway, Coastal Highway, and Bleak Inlet, you would sometimes find items washed ashore, but these were usually things like sticks, wood, that sort of thing. Sometimes you get fish. If you're very lucky, you find saplings. Now this is completely changed. You can find all sorts of things. You can find a backpack, you can find lockers, in the rarest of cases, you can find a boat with all sorts of loot. And the way it works is that it resets with a blizzard. So if you're in these areas and the blizzard hits, afterwards, if you go check the coastal line, so where the water meets the ice, you'll find loot there, and there's way more loot than before. In the past there's only a little bit now and then, but now there's a blizzard, it resets, and you can get all sorts of things. All sorts of stuff washes up, wolf carcass, a corpse, all sorts of stuff. So this is something worth checking from now on. If you are in regions with a shoreline, you should go and check whenever you can. And then they have added new clothing to the game. The jersey, there's actually 4 different things. They previously said there were 3, but there's 4. And three of these are actually in Interloper, to my surprise. And the first thing that's added is the jersey, the hockey jersey, which is very Canadian. This is a great inner layer type of clothing. which is basically the same thing as the thin wool sweater, slightly better. Then there's something very cool called Aviator Hat and Jacket. You can find these in the Forsaken Airfield, but you can also find them around Great Bear. And this is pretty much the best hat and jacket you can get on Interloper, pretty much. So they're kind of rare, but they're very, very good. And in addition to these three, there is a fourth item called Technical Balaclava, which you should find in the Tail story mode at some point, but you can also find it randomly here and there. It's like a rare loot. It's basically an improved version of the Balaclava already in the game. This clothing item should not be an Interloper, only on the lower difficulties. However, due to a glitch, it was possible to find this on Interloper, but it's not tagged as a non-loper item, so it's either not meant to be an Interloper or it's very, very rare an Interloper. A bit like the wool long johns and climbing socks, which are possible to get an Interloper, but it's really, really rare. So that was the main changes that were made in this DLC. And a lot of this is free update. So the Fire-Hardened Arrows and the Oak Trees and Acorns, the Beachcombing and the Bunkers, all that's free. So if you don't buy the DLC, you still get this in the game when it updates, which is great. I'm not 100% sure if the new clothing is DLC or not, but that's not such a big deal. However, at this point, if you haven't bought it already, at this point I would say I recommend you get the DLC. It's only $20. It's going to increase in price as things get added. But there's so much more stuff to still add. But the radio is, to me, alone worth getting the DLC for. Because if you buy the DLC, not only do you unlock all this other stuff, you unlock new areas, you unlock, item variants and new items, but you unlock basically a whole new way to interact with the world. And the radio is just so cool. It's a whole new reason to go out during Aurora. If you watched me play, you see I almost never go out during an Aurora because there's no point. It's just too dangerous. But now there is a reason to go out, and I think that's fantastic. So in my opinion, if you didn't have the DLC already, at this point it is worth getting. This video is not sponsored by Hinterland, it's just my opinion. Now before we go, there are some minor changes as well that I've already just mentioned. Not all of these are in the patch notes, and I just thought I'd go through them quickly. First off, you may notice that the icons have changed when you use a campfire, so things look a bit different. So that's a minor thing. That's because they added crafting. There are now also plane crashes around the world. In the different regions in the world, you'll find plane crashes or helicopters scattered about that may have some extra loot in it, which is quite cool. They also changed the ice cracking. So now when you stand on thin ice and it starts to crack, there's actually a crack beneath you that changes to give an indication how long until the ice breaks, which is interesting. And there's also some minor other things. There's some minor texture changes, like for example the baseball hat has changed how it looks when you drop it and that sort of thing. There's a couple of other things people have said have changed, but I don't know if they did. Someone pointed out that you now can see gloves when you hold a rifle, but I tried that and I couldn't see it. So I think that probably was a bug or a mod or something. And I have gotten quite a few comments saying that they feel wolves and bears act differently than they did before. And in my opinion, I can't tell anything different. To me, the bears work and wolves act exactly how they always did. There's no difference. The torch trick works with wolves still. I don't see any difference at all. They work by the same rules as before. I think maybe when people try out new content, when they encounter a variation of the normal content, they think it's new, when actually it's just a variation or bug or interaction that is a range of what could have happened before. Just like when sometimes people get the DLC and then they have gone to one area in the past and found lots of loot, then install the DLC, go to this area again and there's less loot, and they think, oh, there's less loot than before. But no, it's just varied how much loot you got in that run. That's not to say that loot hasn't changed, though it has changed, but it's not really anything noteworthy. So that's it. That's everything that was added with the DLC Part 2. I think it's a great addition. It flashes out the Forsaken Airfield. Now there's an additional reason to go there, because you find the radio, and there's also hidden caches around Forsaken Airfield. So I think this is a great DLC, and we still have a lot to go. If you buy it now, you get all of these things and everything else included later, such as the cougar, the sled, safe house customization, and all sorts of other stuff. So I think this is absolutely fantastic. I think the radio itself especially is great. So that's basically what's been added with the DLC so far. Final note, I'm doing this narration in one take because there's less time for me to do these videos these days, so apologies for any stuttering here and there. In any case, whether you have the DLC or not, I hope you enjoyed this video and you enjoy the game as it is now. Even if you don't have the DLC, the game is fantastic. You're getting so many things changed, so many things added. It's a really, really great game. If you do get the DLC though, you get even more stuff added to it. Regardless of that, I hope you enjoy your runs, that you enjoy the game, no matter how you play it. DLC, no DLC, mods, whatever you do. As long as you're having fun playing it, that's what matters. So until then, I'll see you in the future when we see what is coming with the next DLC. Bye bye, survivors.